The vast reaches of space are filled with quiet mystery stretching endlessly into the unknown. The Stark have explored the furthest corners of the galaxy and catalogued countless species and civilizations, but they have never encountered anything like this. A strange human warship has appeared on their scanners, and for weeks now it has eluded their attempts to study it. The ship is unlike any other, its movements precise and deliberate, its technology unfathomable. They have watched it silently from afar, unable to make sense of it. The humans have been marked as a primitive species on the Stark database, but this warship challenges everything they know. Every time they try to gather information, the ship vanishes from their scans like a shadow slipping through their fingers. Nothing about this makes sense. There is no signal coming from it, not a single transmission or indicator of life on board. Its presence alone is unnerving. There are no energy bursts or detectable emissions that would hint at what it truly is. The Stark begin to wonder if they are dealing with something more than just a simple ship. They know it is not a fluke, no cosmic anomaly, but a calculated presence. The humans are not typically known for their technological advances, and yet this vessel appears to defy all logic and reason. The Stark begin to question their assumptions about humanity. Could this be a mistake? Or have they missed something crucial, something they could have overlooked in their analysis? Or maybe something they never thought possible in their observations? Space is vast and full of strange occurrences, but this ship feels different, like it was placed there on purpose. They decide to take action, no longer content to merely observe. They are not ones to fear, but the more they watch, the more something unsettling gnaws at them. Something about the ship's silence speaks volumes of a story they have yet to understand. Their curiosity drives them to investigate, but there is no way to prepare for what they will discover deep within their minds. The Stark feel a shift. It's an odd sensation. They've never encountered a threat like this, not one that defies their logic and calculation so completely. The Stark aren't sure what to think, yet the possibility of this ship being a trick or a weapon of unknown origin becomes too powerful to ignore. A decision is made. They will go and learn what this ship truly is, whether it's a message or a test sent from humanity's strange and enigmatic depths. They will approach cautiously. They cannot afford to make a mistake. The time has come to uncover the secrets of the U.S. Vanguard and what it might mean for the galaxy itself. Unknown to this Stark, their fate is about to change as the warship drifts silently through the stars ahead of them, waiting patiently for its visitors. The first move is made, and the game begins. The Stark fleet assembles in the shadows of a nearby asteroid field, carefully positioning their ships to approach the human warship. The tension is palpable despite the cold silence of space. The Stark have been known for their disciplined and methodical nature, but there's something about the U.S. Vanguard that unsettles even the most composed of them. It's as if the ship itself is watching them, calculating its next move, even before they know what to do next. The order is given to approach. A small delegation of Stark ships slowly closes the distance between them and the mysterious human vessel. All communications have failed to break the silence. The humans have not responded to any signals, not even a hint of acknowledgement from the warship. A deep curiosity wells up in the Stark. They know they must understand what this ship represents before making any rash decisions. The Stark are cautious by nature, and they know that every encounter with an unknown species could lead to war or cooperation, but they are ready to test the waters now. It is a calculated risk, but they've made their decision. Captain Sulrath stands at the command of the lead ship, his dark eyes staring out into the void as the immense form of the U.S. Vanguard grows larger before them. The humans are still silent. He gives a silent order, and the delegation begins transmitting their first message, a simple one of peace and inquiry. A soft hum of energy fills the ship as their communication system sends the signal out into space. This is their first attempt to contact this unknown species, and they feel the weight of it hanging in the air. The Stark wait for a response, unsure of what they will hear, or if they will hear anything at all. Moments stretch into minutes, and just as they are about to prepare for another futile attempt, their screens flicker. Then a voice crackles through their communication system. The language is fluid and perfect in its syntax and tone. The Sithark are stunned for a moment. Not only are the humans speaking their language, but they are doing so with flawless precision. How could this be? The humans had never shown such proficiency in any language before, and yet here they were responding in perfect Sithark. Their first thought is that they've somehow encountered an advanced group of humans, perhaps one that has been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone anticipated. But the next words from the human ship command center are even more perplexing. "We've been expecting you, Captain Selrath." The calmness of the voice sends a ripple of confusion through the Sithark. The humans had known they were coming, and yet they had never made contact with them before. The mystery deepens as the words continue. "This is Admiral Nathaniel Cross of the U.S. Vanguard. We know you've been watching us for some time, and we're ready to talk." A wave of realization washes over Selrath. He hadn't even considered the possibility that the humans might have known all along. But how much did they know? What had they seen? What were they preparing for? The Sithark leader feels a sudden shift in the dynamics of power. The humans have surprised him once again. Captain Selrath stands in stunned silence as the voice of Admiral Nathaniel Cross filters through the communication channel. His mind races trying to comprehend the situation. The humans had not only anticipated their arrival but had somehow prepared for it, as if the U.S. Vanguard had been waiting specifically for the Sithark to come. He finds himself questioning everything. He thought he knew about the human species. Could they have known this Sithark would come for this encounter? How long have they been studying them? Selrath pushes these thoughts aside and forces himself to focus on the conversation. The message from the human warship continues. Its calm and authoritative tone contrasts sharply with the anxiety that swells in Selrath's chest. "We understand you have questions about us." Admiral Cross's voice cuts through the tension. "And you've likely been observing us for some time, as we've noticed your ships in the vicinity. We're prepared to offer answers, but first we ask for your trust." The Sithark captain feels a flicker of uncertainty. His first instinct is to be cautious, but something about the human's voice, its steady tone and lack of aggression, causes him to hesitate. Perhaps this isn't the threat they thought it was, but he's not ready to let his guard down just yet. He signals his fleet to remain in position, but gives the order to open a direct channel to the U.S. Vanguard. Admiral Cross. Selrath's voice is firm but respectful. "We have observed your warship for several cycles. Now you have shown no outward signs of hostility, yet your technology is beyond anything we've encountered. How is it that you can speak our language so perfectly? And why have you waited until now to reveal yourself?" There's a long pause before Admiral Cross replies. His words come slowly, as though choosing each carefully. "We've been preparing for this moment for a long time, Captain. The U.S. Vanguard is part of an initiative to reach out to species like yours, who may not fully understand humanity or its place in the galaxy. It was always our plan to meet the Sithark. We knew we'd come across each other eventually, but we had to make sure we were ready." Selrath listens carefully, intrigued yet skeptical. The human's response is too simple, almost too calm for such an unprecedented moment. The Sithark have never encountered a species who would approach them this way. They've always had to approach others with extreme caution and military might. But these humans seem willing to converse first, to extend an olive branch. He finds it unsettling. And yet there's an undeniable magnetism to the confidence in Cross's voice. "You are not what we expected," Selrath says, after a moment, his voice tinged with genuine curiosity. "I did not expect humanity to be so prepared." Admiral Cross's response comes quickly. "We've had our share of struggles, Captain. We fought wars within our own species and survived. We've learned to adapt quickly to our enemies and to the unknown. And when it came time to look beyond our borders, we knew that there would be challenges far greater than ourselves. That's why we studied every species. We could find every system we could reach. We wanted to be ready." Selrath is quiet for a long moment, contemplating the depth of what Cross has just said. That Sithark have always prided themselves on their ability to calculate and predict the behavior of other species, but the humans have shown a level of foresight that seems almost impossible. They've prepared for the unknown in ways the Sithark never would have imagined. As the silence lingers, Selrath feels a shift in his perspective. This encounter was not just a first contact, but an invitation to something larger, an alliance. Perhaps, or a test of strength. He wonders what the humans truly seek from them, what they're really after. The tense silence that followed Admiral Cross's words hung in the cold vacuum of space. Captain Selrath was still trying to process everything that had been said. The humans had prepared for the Stark. The whole time they knew they would come, and yet they had never revealed themselves until now. It was a puzzle that didn't add up, and for the first time in a long while, Selrath wasn't sure how to proceed. Before he could speak, another transmission cut through the stillness. It wasn't from the U.S. Vanguard, but from the edge of their detection range. His eyes snapped to the tactical readouts on his display. His heart skipped a beat. The Sithark delegation wasn't alone. Another ship was approaching. Its design unlike anything in their records. It was massive, an ancient dreadnought-class warship that should have been long extinct. The energy readings from it were off the charts, the type of power that could level entire fleets without breaking the sweat. The human warship's calm had suddenly turned to alertness, and Selrath could hear the voice of Admiral Cross once more cutting through the communication channel. "Captain Selrath, we're not alone." His voice was tight with urgency. "We've detected a hostile force incoming. It's an unknown class of warship, and we're reading impossible levels of energy from it. I suggest you prepare for combat." A cold realization swept over Selrath as his mind processed the information. They had been so focused on the human warship that they hadn't detected the threat lurking nearby. The unknown warship was moving fast, and the Sithark fleet had no way to stop it if it attacked them first. The delegation of Sithark ships quickly switched to combat mode, all systems ready for defensive action. But the alien warship's sheer size and power made it clear that they wouldn't stand a chance alone. This wasn't just an enemy force. This was something far worse, something older. Selrath gave the order to move his ships into a defensive formation, the Sithark fleet quickly spreading out to avoid being an easy target for the incoming assault. But even as they moved into position, the ancient warship fired a blast of energy that nearly shattered the shields of the closest Sithark vessel. The power was overwhelming. The shockwave rocked through their ships, and the Sithark fleet was forced to reevaluate their strategy. The humans weren't sitting idly by. The U.S. Vanguard immediately powered up its weapon systems, its sleek form moving swiftly to intercept the oncoming enemy fire. Admiral Cross's voice was crisp through the comms. "We'll provide cover for you, Captain, but we need to strike fast. This thing is no ordinary ship. We have to disable its weapons before it wipes us out." Selrath's heart raced as he assessed the situation. The humans weren't afraid. They had jumped into action without hesitation, showing an aggressiveness that Sithark had not expected. Their warship was already engaging the unknown behemoth, unleashing a powerful burst of energy that seemed to momentarily stun the ancient vessel. But it wasn't enough. The enemy ship quickly recovered and began to return fire with a vengeance. The Sithark and humans were now in a race against time to survive, and the odds were stacked heavily against them. Selrath knew this was no ordinary battle. They were dealing with something that had been dormant for centuries, something that would take all their combined strength to defeat. The question was, how long would it take before they realized they might not make it out alive? The battle was chaos. The ancient warship unleashed a barrage of energy that sent shockwaves through space. The U.S. Vanguard and the Sithark fleet barely managed to avoid the full force of its assault. The weapon systems on both sides fired in a desperate attempt to keep the enemy at bay. But it was clear that the tide of the battle was leaning toward the overwhelming power of the unknown vessel. Selrath's mind raced as he commanded his fleet to maneuver into evasive patterns. His ships danced in and out of the line of fire, barely avoiding the destructive pulses that lit up the dark void around them. The U.S. Vanguard wasn't faring much better despite its advanced technology. It was fast and powerful, but against a force like this, its capabilities were stretched thin. The ancient warship's weapons were unlike anything they had ever seen. Its energy blasts, powerful enough to tear apart whole ships with a single hit. The Sithark were not unfamiliar with warfare. They had fought countless battles in the past, but this was different. This wasn't just another skirmish. This was a war for survival, and they weren't prepared to face a force like this alone. Selrath turned his attention back to Admiral Cross, who was still coordinating the humans' defensive strategy. The human commander's voice crackled through the comms. "We're going to need a new plan, Captain. This thing won't stop unless we hit it at the core. Its weapons are too powerful to fight head-on." The Sith'ark captain's mind sharpened as he considered the words Cross had said. He knew that if they didn't find a way to disable the enemy's weapons, they would all be destroyed. There was no room for hesitation, no time to wait for reinforcements. The only choice left was to attack the ancient warship's heart, its core systems. Selrath's voice came through the comms, steady but urgent. "We need to work together. We'll create a diversion while you strike at the core. The U.S. Vanguard is faster than any of our ships. It can get in close while we hold off their fire." Cross's voice was quick and decisive. "Agreed, we'll take care of the rest." The plan was set. The Sith'ark fleet began to split apart, moving into different positions to confuse the enemy and create openings for the U.S. Vanguard. The human warship moved with precision, darting in and out of fire zones as it approached the ancient ship, its weapons blasting holes in the enemy's shields. But it wasn't enough. They needed to get inside the warship's defenses if they were to strike the core. Selrath watched in tense silence as the U.S. Vanguard took a direct hit from the enemy's weapons. The blast rocked the human ship, but it quickly recovered and moved back into the fray. Its resilience stunned him. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. As the U.S. Vanguard drew closer to the ancient warship's core, Selrath issued the order for his fleet to launch their final assault. Every ship now was a target, but they were willing to make the sacrifice. The Sith'ark and the humans fought together as one, a unified force against an overwhelming foe. The battle raged on with no guarantee of success, but there was something in the air, a quiet but powerful shift in momentum. The Sith'ark realized the humans had more than just weapons on their side. They had something far more important. They had determination and the will to see this fight through until the end. They would not go down without a fight, and neither would the Sith'ark. The battle's fury continued to escalate as both the U.S. Vanguard and the Sith'ark fleet pushed their limits, working together in a tense but coordinated dance of survival. The unknown ancient warship loomed like a dark monolith, impervious to most of their strikes, its hull an unyielding fortress. The void between the two fleets was lit up with explosions and flashes of energy, the tension of the battlefield almost palpable in every heartbeat. Selrath's thoughts raced. The plan was risky, the outcome uncertain, but it was the only choice left. They had to strike at the core of the enemy warship, and they had to do it now before the unknown ship could obliterate them. The U.S. Vanguard had shown its resilience, but even it couldn't endure much longer under this onslaught. "Captain Selrath." Admiral Cross's voice broke through the chaos, steady but filled with an edge of urgency. "We're close. We need another few minutes to disable their shielding, but they're responding faster than we anticipated. Can you hold them off a little longer?" Selrath's eyes flicked over his fleet's status. The Sith'ark ships were showing signs of heavy damage. Shields were weakening. Weapons were strained. The fleet's maneuvering was becoming less effective as enemy fire picked them off one by one. Every second counted, and they couldn't afford to waste any time. "We're pushing as hard as we can," Selrath replied, his voice cold with determination. "We won't let them get through. Hold your position. The Sith'ark will cover you." He knew the risk. The Sith'ark ships were now fully in the line of fire, sacrificing themselves to keep the U.S. Vanguard intact. His orders rang out, commanding his fleet to form a tight defensive perimeter around the human ship, directing all their remaining firepower toward the ancient warship. Every weapon salvo that connected with the enemy's shields seemed like a fleeting victory, but it wasn't enough. The ancient warship's guns fired again, and the shockwave rocked the Sith'ark fleet. Another ship was lost in the blaze, debris scattering across the battlefield. Selrath watched, heart clenching, as one of his most trusted commander's ships disintegrated. But there was no time for mourning, not yet. He gritted his teeth and steeled himself for the next phase. "Now, Admiral," Sel Wrath called, watching through his tactical interface as the U.S. Vanguard made its final approach toward the ancient warship's core. The human warship cut through space like a lightning bolt, weaving between blasts of fire, its weapons blazing in rapid succession. It was clear the humans were fully committed, and the Stark had no intention of failing them now. Admiral Cross's voice rang out, stronger than ever. "All power to forward shields. We're going in. Prepare for close-quarters combat. On my mark." The U.S. Vanguard surged forward with explosive speed, breaking through the last of the enemy fire, its sleek form darting like a phantom. Zelrath could see the path ahead, the opening they had created. The Vanguard was inside the enemy's defenses now, its weapons hammering away at the exposed core of the ancient ship. But the unknown warship had one final trick. A massive pulse of energy erupted from its core, a ripple in space itself, aimed directly at the U.S. Vanguard. The shot was immense, larger than anything they had encountered before. Rat's heart stopped as he watched the blast close in on the Vanguard, knowing that if it hit, nothing could survive. "No," Rath shouted, as if his voice could defy fate. But before the pulse could reach its target, the U.S. Vanguard made a split-second evasive maneuver, dropping beneath the incoming energy blast. The shockwave from the pulse still rocked the battlefield, and the Vanguard shuddered under the impact, but it was still intact. "Admiral Cross," Wrath barked. "Now, strike the core. You have one chance." Seconds felt like hours, the universe itself holding its breath. The U.S. Vanguard surged forward once more, now within range of the core. This was it, the moment where everything would be decided. The fate of the battle, of their alliance, rested on the next move. The silence of space felt deafening in the moments after the U.S. Vanguard dodged the enemy's final energy pulse. The colossal warship loomed like an immovable mountain in the distance, its shields flickering dangerously. The human ship's hull was battered and smoking from the onslaught, but it was still alive, still pressing forward with the singular purpose of ending the fight. Selrath's pulse raced as he watched the humans make their move. The Vanguard's weapons fired once more, now targeting the heart of the ancient warship. A high-pitched screech filled the comms as the blast hit the warship's central core, followed by a deafening, impossible roar. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze in time. The ancient ship shuddered, its massive frame groaning as its outer plating began to peel away, revealing the core of the ship, an unstable, pulsing reactor at its center. "Now," Admiral Cross's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Keep the pressure on. We're going for the core." The human warship charged forward, its engines roaring as it angled directly toward the reactor. In that moment, Zelrath saw something in the human ship that mirrored the same determination he had seen in his own people. They were risking everything. One final push, one last attempt to end the battle. Zelrath's orders rang out across the Sithark fleet. "Provide cover fire. No one leaves their post. Focus all weapons on the ancient warship's defenses." The Sithark fleet, now reduced to less than half its original number, launched a renewed wave of fire at the ancient vessel. The concentrated fire from the Stark ships drew the enemy's attention, allowing the U.S. Vanguard to close the gap between itself and the reactor. The core of the ancient warship was now exposed, and it was more fragile than anyone had anticipated. The Vanguard fired again, and this time the explosion that followed rocked the entire battlefield. The pulse of energy from the core sent a shockwave through space, sending debris and particles scattering across the void. It felt as though the universe itself had shuddered at the impact. But then, just as quickly, the light faded. The ancient warship stood motionless, its massive frame cracked and torn, its once mighty engines sputtering into silence. A series of catastrophic explosions rippled across its structure as the core went critical, and soon there was nothing left but the dying echo of its final moments. Zelrath's breath hitched in his chest as he watched the once indomitable warship collapse in on itself. It was over. They had done it. The Sathark and the humans had struck a blow against the unknown, together. But the cost had been steep. Both fleets had taken immense damage, and many ships had been lost. "We did it," Zelrath whispered, the weight of the battle lifting for the first time since it had begun. His voice was laced with disbelief, awe, and a profound exhaustion. But as his ships regrouped, he saw the U.S. vanguard still moving, still standing. The humans had done what no one else could have. Against all odds, they had delivered the fatal blow to the ancient warship. Their resilience, their willingness to fight until the last, had proven that they were not just survivors. They were warriors. "Captain Zelrath." Admiral Cross's voice came through the comms, steady despite the toll the battle had taken on his crew. "We've disabled the enemy's core, but we're in critical condition. We need assistance, repairs, medical support, and reinforcements." Zelrath nodded, though the human could not see it. "We'll provide assistance, Admiral. This battle belongs to both our people, and we will see it through together." The Stark ships began to move into position, their energy reserves low but their spirits high. Zelrath had seen the strength in humanity, the courage that radiated even in the face of overwhelming odds. It was something he had never expected to find in such a young species, but it was there, undeniable and undeniable, in the battle they had just fought. As the smoke of the battlefield began to clear, both fleets gathered together, side by side, standing tall in the aftermath of their victory. The warship that had threatened them was no more, and the darkness of uncertainty had been pushed back. For now. Zelrath looked at the surviving ships, knowing this was only the beginning. The humans were not a species to be underestimated. There was more to come, more to discover, and perhaps, just perhaps, this could be the start of something even greater than the victory they had just claimed. The remains of the ancient warship drifted in silence, its once mighty structure reduced to debris, scattered across the void like the broken fragments of a long-forgotten empire. Zelrath gazed at the wreckage, his thoughts swirling. The battle had been won, but at what cost? The Sathark fleet had lost many ships, and the U.S. vanguard had been severely damaged. Yet, despite the losses, they had emerged victorious. His eyes shifted to the human warship, the U.S. vanguard, still hovering in the aftermath, its hull scorched and battered but still standing strong. The humans had not only fought alongside them, but they had led the charge in the final moments. Zelrath had never seen such unwavering resolve in a species. They were young, by the standards of the galaxy, but their spirit was unyielding. It was something the Stark had not expected, nor had they fully understood until now. The comms buzzed, and Admiral Cross's voice came through, steady as ever. "Captain Zelrath, we've sustained heavy damage, but we're holding together. I think we've earned a bit of rest, don't you think?" Zelrath let out a deep breath, his tense muscles slowly relaxing. "Rest, indeed, Admiral. But we should not forget the cost of this victory. There are still many in both our fleets who need attention." There was a pause before Cross responded, his voice softer now. "You're right, Captain. But perhaps this is the beginning of something more than just a battle. We've fought side by side, and we've survived. I'd like to think we've earned something more than just an alliance. Perhaps friendship." The word lingered in the air between them, the weight of its meaning sinking in. Friendship. It was a concept the Sathark had never truly understood, but something in Cross's voice made it sound like a possibility. Something real, something worth striving for. Zelrath glanced out at the remaining ships of his fleet. "Perhaps, Admiral. The Sathark do not often make alliances, and we have never sought friendship with those we have encountered. But today I find myself willing to consider that possibility." Cross's voice grew warmer. "Then let's start by getting our people the help they need. I'll send over repair crews to assist with your ships. And once that's done, we can talk about what comes next." Zelrath gave a short nod, his mind already shifting to the immediate tasks at hand. Agreed. We'll need all the help we can get, and once the repairs are underway, we can share what we've learned from this encounter. Perhaps there are things both our species can gain from each other, things we've never thought of before. The Stark captain turned to his bridge crew, issuing commands for recovery and repair. They had fought hard, and they had won. But the work was far from over. Still, there was a sense of calm settling over him. The burden of the battle had been shared, and it was a burden he no longer had to carry alone. As the Sethark and human ships began the slow process of recovery, Selrath couldn't help but look back toward the U.S. Vanguard. The human ship had fought as fiercely as the Sethark, and its crew had shown a resolve that matched his own. In that moment, something shifted deep within him. Perhaps humanity wasn't so different from the Sethark after all. Perhaps they shared more than just a fight for survival. They shared a drive, a will to endure, to protect, and to grow. This is only the beginning, Selrath murmured to himself as the stars flickered softly in the distance. There is much more to learn, much more to explore together. The battle had ended, but the true journey was just beginning. And for the first time in his life, Selrath felt a glimmer of hope, not just for his people, but for the future of this new partnership with humanity. As the two fleets, one battered and one battle-hardened, drifted into the calm after the storm, the galaxy stretched out before them, full of potential and promise. The Sethark and humans had forged a bond in the fire of battle, and that bond, Selrath knew, would be the foundation of something much greater.